This is the leftover fabric from the lining of my Edwardian walking skirt. You may recall that I used an old sheet to flatline it. And there's not much left, but I was just able to get the main pieces for this blouse on the scraps. At the back there, this is doubled. I got the sleeve on this piece. I'll be cutting at the line for the shorter sleeves, obviously. And I was able to get this on the only piece big enough to fit on the fold. The only problem is that there are numerous holes in this piece. And there's also one here, so midway down the pattern piece. So I'm going to have to be creative about that. I was looking at the pattern for Inspiration, and I really like this blouse down in the corner, and I think I could do something like that if I supplement with another fabric. I don't have any lace that's this color, and I don't like the idea of using white or ivory lace in this pale green blouse. But I did come across this fabric while I was looking for something else, and the color is just about spot on. It's very sheer. It's also very wrinkled, as you can see. I need to press it. And it's also quite stiff. So I'm thinking I'll make a yoke out of this and possibly get some matching embroidery floss and do some fun embroidery on the yoke, and possibly also do some lace-like pieces like these down the front to account for the weird holes. But if I cut out the base front of the cotton sheet fabric and make it wide enough that I can put all these pin tucks in, I think I'll be able to play with it and make this work. This just very quickly shows how I added width to the front piece to allow for pin tucks at the center front. I can do a more detailed video about this in the future, if anyone is interested. After I had cut out the main pieces, I needed to do all of the embroidery before I could construct anything. I traced the top of the front pattern piece onto my organdy with a pencil, and marked a square yoke with some basting thread, using the square neckline cutting line on the pattern as a guide. Then I started some freehand embroidery. This whole design was very much made up as I went along. Here's what I got done last night. I'm really liking how it looks. Very light and airy and feminine, giving me spring vibes. Ignore the children's sounds in the background, by the way. I might add a little bit more, like another vine coming off of here and another one in here to sort of fill in the corners, but yeah, liking it so far. Doing some embroidery in the car today while I wait for a family member at the dentist. This dentist is a little off the beaten path, so I'm mostly just listening to beautiful birdsong while I sit in the parking lot and wait. I am working on the collar embroidery. I have finished with the yoke, so just give you a little update here. I don't remember where I left off filming this, but I finished the little vine. Decided I wanted something geometric as a border around it. I have marked the seam allowance where it will meet the collar, and I'm going to do the same geometric border on the top and bottom of the collar, and then another vine in the middle. It will be a geometric pattern surrounding organic vines. It's kind of the thought I'm going with. Now for the additional lace design. I first created a 1-inch wide curved section on either side coming down from the shoulders and turning as they approach center front to form vertical columns. These would end at the line for the drawstring casing. I also added another vertical branch coming down from the curved line and turning at a right angle to connect to the side seam. These would cover the remaining holes in the fabric, if I planned it right. Here is the collar. I am totally in love with it. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Very much like I pictured in my head, so love it when that works out. You can see the pencil lines where I traced the pattern piece, and then I traced in to the seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch on this pattern, to get the embroidered portion. The idea is that the lower edge border of the collar will form the top border of the yoke, but of course be 3-dimensional. So it will be basically 2 vines, and I intentionally designed them so that they'd go in opposite directions. You can see the pattern of the leaves. On this one, they're all pointing to the wearer's left, and on this one it's all pointing to the wearer's right. So the 2 vines are each going to be bordered with the geometric border, and I'm going to need to replicate this yoke for the back pieces as well. Okay, this is as far as 2 skeins of embroidery floss has gotten me. You can see that I need to finish this section of the design, and then the front will be done, and I am really excited. I am so thrilled with how it's looking right now. I can envision the finished blouse. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to wear it. It's really coming along. Happy with it. I want to eventually put little flowers, I think every 3rd junction of these diamond shapes, just to make the long geometric bits a little less boring and to sort of tie them in more with the more organic vine pattern. I think I will also eventually embroider some flowers and vines on the actual blouse fabric, the opaque green cotton. And my reference image does have embroidery on that front section as well. But that is something I can do after the blouse is constructed, so that can wait. All of this embroidery needs to be done before I can put the blouse together because of the way insertion lace works. I need to add the embroidered bits to the blouse fabric while it's still flat before I put it all together. So once I'm done with the front, I will draw out and embroider the bits for the back, because I will need a matching yoke section on the back, and I will also need to extend these 2 lines around the shoulder, and I'm just going to make a curve at the back and have them, connect. They'll connect over the button center back closure, but hopefully that won't take nearly as long as this part has taken me, because I want to wear this in just over a week. So I really need to finish embroidering so I can put it together. Oh, and I ordered more embroidery floss along with some more embroidery needles in case I lose or break the one that I have that currently works for this project. I got them from, I believe it's everythingcrossstitch.com. I'll put a link in the description. Before I could embroider the back yokes, I first had to draw out my pattern. I used the same method as I had for the front, only this time I remembered to film it. First I traced out the neckline and the shoulder of the back piece onto my fabric, then marked the square line on the pattern for the yoke. I also used the line on the pattern for cutting out a lining for a sheer blouse waist as my guide for the curved section of embroidery, measuring a 1/2 inch on either side to give the 1 inch wide curved line. Then for the actual design of the embroidery, I marked roughly every inch along either side of the curved sections and connected those marks with crisscrossing diagonal lines. This took some trial and error. I tried to keep the design consistent with the front embroidery that I had already done. I like to use a freckle on my arm to measure my embroidery floss. This particular freckle is approximately 18 inches from my fingertips, and it's rather handy to use as it's always there. I found that the 18-inch length works best for me, as it's long enough to be useful for a long period of time, but not so long as to get constantly tangled. I typically use 2 strands of floss together, so I divide each of my cut pieces into 3, since each skein has 6 strands, and wind them on my thread winder. I like to prepare a lot of thread at a time when working on a large-scale project such as this. It's so satisfying to have a nice fat stash of pre-cut thread ready to go. When I get to the end of my floss, I weave in the end behind the finished work. I tend to keep using each piece of floss until the bitter end, so occasionally I have to turn the needle around and use the eye to thread it through the last couple of times. When starting a new strand, I pre-weave my end under the finished work in the same manner. This avoids any lumpy knots on the back of the piece, but becomes very secure after only a couple of stitches. I used a back stitch for the geometric area of the pattern, as I found it gave me the most control with keeping my lines nice and straight, or straight along the curve. For the leafy vine, I used the stem stitch. This stitch can make some really beautiful curves, and I found it much better suited to the organic, freeform nature of this part of the design. The little leaves are just done in a satin stitch, but unfortunately I did not get any usable footage of me doing one. Finally, over 2 months later, the embroidery was finished. Here it is all pressed and ready to cut out. And you can see how I laid out the pieces to try to get the best use of my fabric. I ended up using about half of my organdy, and I have plans for the remainder. I have pinned this all to the base, sort of template that I cut out from the pattern with no width added. And I can almost perfectly match my top sheer layer to the template. It's only here that I cut this arm side in a little bit too far, which is fine because all of this is going to be trimmed away after I've sewn the insertion. So all in all, pretty successful. Just a little bit of, not remembering what I had planned when I actually started working on the embroidery. I thought that this was going to be one big open space and these would have pleats. And so I was going to add more embroidery here, but instead I'm going to have vertical lines of pin tucks going all the way down, which I think will look really nice. And I might add some embroidery in here, depending on how much more embellishment I want to add. Now I'm going to need to measure and pin all of the tucks, get those sewn before I can add all of the embellishment. I do have the back yoke and additional insertion pinned in place, and this will sort of be my test of how I'm going to do the insertion. I have been thinking about it for weeks and just trying to wrap my head around the order of operations, but this will be simple because there's not going to be any pleats or tucks in these back pieces. And that will give me some confidence, I hope, to work on the front, which is going to be complicated. The first step of the insertion was to sew along the embroidery just inside the outer line of stitching. Then I could trim away the ground fabric on the inside, leaving approximately a 1/4 inch of seam allowance. This gets pressed, first flat to set the stitching, then folded back and pressed again so that I can stitch it down and out of the way. I used a narrow zigzag stitch for extra stability. And finally, I can trim away the sheer fabric right next to the second row of stitching. I thought at first that my precision snips would be the right tool for this job, but quickly realized that I could cut a smoother line with my regular fabric shears. This part is only slightly nerve-wracking, but the finished result is so worth it. Okay, so I have done 3 pin tucks down the center on one side, and I'm going to do 3 more for the other side so that it's even, but I was trying to make sure that I would have this hole covered up. I want to wear this in 2 days, and it's not looking super promising for that, but I'm going to try. Okay, I've started sewing on the embroidery on the front. The yoke is sewn in place nicely, I think, centered over the pin tucks. The pin tucks ended up being a bit wider than the space allowed between these 2 sections of embroidery, but fortunately I don't have to rigidly adhere to this structure because I can cut the sheer fabric away. So I'm just going to ever so slightly cheat this one out. I've sewn this one down already. I was very careful not to catch the edge, the folded edge of the tuck inside. But like I said, I'm going to cheat this over and up just a smidge so that it's a little more level with this one, because they ended up being slightly offset. This fabric was very difficult to embroider on. It's very wiggly. So I think all in all I did a really good job of keeping it as symmetrical looking as possible, even if it's not exactly actually symmetrical. The overall effect is pretty symmetrical, and that's really all I care about. But I do want it to look a little bit better, so I'm just going to raise that up a smidge, scoot it over so it's just outside of the tuck on that side to mirror this one. And the rest, I think, is going to work out pretty well. There's that hole covered. I did get this hole beautifully covered by the embroidery, so once I get that all cut away on the inside, it'll look really nice. Before I cut these away, I should confirm that the back sections match. They did match on the sheer fabric. I was checking as I was doing the embroidery on the back to make sure it was still matching up both lines. So it should match. It's actually a lot less complicated than I was making it out to be. I really am liking how the tucks look in the center. I think it's a really pretty sort of prim detail. I've always liked the look of pin tucks, and yeah, I'm having fun with it, so plugging along. And now the rest is pinned in place. You can see that there's a gap here where I slit up the sheer layer in the front to make sure that I would be outside of the edge of the tucks. And a bubble here where I've brought this point up to meet that one. I measured down from the yoke and this was 2.5 inches, so I measured down 2.5 inches from this side, and it both looks symmetrical and actually is symmetrical now, so that's good. You can also see this bubble here in the sheer fabric where I had to smooth in from the edge, and then I also had to schmooze it a bit to get the vertical line to look straight, which I also had to do here because, like I said, the sheer fabric is very wiggly, and it was kind of making a wave. But this is all pretty easy to kind of, futz with and make it do what I want to do. So I guess that's the benefit of the fabric being a bit wiggly, is there's room for error. It's actually fairly forgiving of me moving it around, I had to smooth this part outward so that it would not bubble here. And yeah, it's worked. I think it will be good. Oh my gosh, you guys, I love it. I love it so, so much. Oh. As you can see, I've trimmed away all the excess on both the front and the back. And it's so living up to my vision, and I'm just so thrilled. Oh, exciting. Okay, it is the next morning. It is the day before my event, and here's where we are with the blouse waist. The front is completely done. All of the embroidery has been inserted. All of the excess material has been trimmed. I have attached the collar, and I have also put the front and back together. It does fit me. I've tried it on. Doesn't seem to fit my dress form quite as well, but that's fine. Yeah, I am super thrilled. It went together much quicker than I anticipated. Probably because I wasn't doing all this slow embroidery work anymore, and now construction was like a breeze. I just folded down, basically narrow hemmed the top and back collar edges. I just turned it under, finger pressed it right along the edge of the embroidery, and hand stitched it down just very carefully, just taking tiny little stitches on the outside so it wouldn't show too bad. I'm happy with how it looks, and I've done the back button placket facings. Those are ready to go for buttons and buttonholes. I just need to attach the sleeves, hem it, and do those buttons and buttonholes. I am also going to trim down the collar seam allowance and then turn the yoke seam allowance over it and stitch that down on the inside by hand, doing a flat felled seam. I did French seams, actually faux French seams at the shoulder, because I needed to be very precise with where my insertion was lining up, so I didn't want to do a French seam and risk the edges not lining up properly when I sewed it the second time. So I did the regular seam allowance on the machine, right sides together, and then on the inside I pressed open the seam allowance and then finger pressed the seam allowances in towards each other and then just stitched them closed by hand. And I didn't get any footage of this because it was late last night and my camera battery had died and I didn't feel like going in the house to get a new one. But yeah, it really ended up looking how I wanted it to. I'm so happy with how the collar looks with the yoke. It's exactly what I had planned, with these borders surrounding the vines and this vine going that way and this vine going that way. I'm so thrilled that my design came together, and I really, really love it. The event I was preparing for was a garden party that I hosted, which turned into a porch party because it was extremely hot. I have no video footage from the party, so please enjoy these still images instead. But I did get my blouse waist finished, enough to wear it for the day, although I still had plenty of embroidery that I wanted to add, as well as some changes to make the fit a bit better. I have since made those changes, added more embroidery, and worn it a second time. But that will all have to wait for part 2, as this video is long enough as it is. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, and if you would like to see more, definitely subscribe. And I will see you soon. Bye.